Hello, everybody. This is Rick Manning, President of Americans for Limited Government, and we are here at what seems like one of the most weird times that I've experienced, where we have apparently a bunch of balloons flying all over the United States. They're Chinese spy balloons, and it's unlike anything I've seen. I guess our Air Force pilots are now going to get to paint balloons on the side of their plane as they shoot down balloon after balloon, which apparently just appear out of nowhere in the middle of our country. So it's a bizarre situation. But here's what we know. Today, NORAD, which is supposed to be doing the crazy thing of actually monitoring and seeing what's going on and making certain we don't have missiles and other things being shot at us. They're well renowned for being able to track Santa Claus every Christmas Eve, but apparently they can't track balloons, because what NORAD has said, I'll make it a little bigger for you. What the head of NORAD said is they didn't spot the suspected Chinese spy balloon or any of the subsequent ones, by the way. And this was a giant spy balloon and they didn't see it. So at least that's what they, if you believe them, take them at their word. The people who have been spending the last 50 years providing the first eyes on sight for the missile defense and the like had a bunch of balloons float by them and didn't know that and didn't see them. This is such a glaring weakness, such a glaring failure, intelligence failure. It's almost impossible to believe. But this is so NORAD's taking the hit that they didn't spot a big giant balloon in the sky. And so what does that mean? Well, what it means is big giant balloon in the sky, the first one we saw, was actually the first line of defense, was a rancher in Montana who looked up and said, wait a second, we don't have two moons. Apparently that was our first line of defense, a rancher in Montana looking up into the sky, not the people we train to look in the sky for incoming threats, not our spy satellites that float around above the Earth and look down and can see things. Can basically see if you're chewing your fingernails or not in terms of identifying what's happening on the ground. Nope. Apparently, we had a giant hole in our vision, and it dealt with balloons. Slow-moving balloons. So now, but that's somewhat contradictory, okay? Because we've known China has been sending spy balloons over military sites worldwide for a while now. So supposedly we've known that the Chinese have been using spy balloons, and yet somehow we weren't looking for them. If you believe that, then we have the morons running our military. But if you believe that's true, so, it's apparently, the Chinese have been running a spy balloon program, according to New York Times, a spy balloon program for quite a while. They've been running them all over the world, and they collect electronic intelligence. So they collect electronic communications, meaning that they're collecting and sending back to China, probably bouncing off their satellites, sending back to China electronic communications from our various military facilities and the like. And we've essentially allowed, a balloon bug into our country to spy on our military secrets, and the American public. It's almost unfathomable that this is true. And so, the question becomes, what do we do about it? And, the fact is, shooting down the balloons as soon as we find them, that's something we should be doing. Being smarter about looking for these things. I mean, they are being driven by the Chinese. They're not just being set in the atmosphere and floating around. So they are being driven by the Chinese to be over certain locations, over certain bases. So we obviously have to do a better job of shuttering them. We've known that they've been flying balloons over Taiwan for quite a while to spy on the Taiwanese, and it's staggering. It's staggering that something so simple was missed by the most powerful military in the world, by the generals who've been promoted to lead the most powerful military in the world. Couldn't figure out spy balloons. I mean, spy balloons have existed since the Civil War, when the Northern Army and the Southern Army would send up balloons, big hot air balloons, a lot like what invaded the land of Oz under the world of Frank Baum, giant spy balloons that would sit there, and they'd be up in the air with just like we see floating around, when people do recreational ballooning, and they'd have people there with a spyglass, and they'd be looking down and trying to check, do troop movements and the like, see how many troops were on the other side of the river. And this was, and sharpshooters would then spend their time on the other side, depending on who's being spied on, shooting at the balloon basket and trying to either deflate the balloon or kill the person inside. So it was rather risky business to be in a balloon spy. But 1860s, friends, this is not new technology. The only thing different about this spy balloons is they fly at a higher altitude, and they have much more sophisticated equipment, and they're self-directed rather than being tied to a tree and just and hope the wind doesn't blow too hard. So this is just a devastating admission for our military, for our intelligence agencies, that they missed this. Now, the other possibility is, of course, that they didn't miss it, and there was just they basically were hoping nobody noticed because they didn't want the confrontation. That's obviously a possibility. But if we're going to take them at their word, we have to believe that they are incompetent and not treasonous. So, I don't know. This is just too bizarre. I'm going to take a couple of comments on this because people seem to really be fired up. Yeah. I'm just going to go Lois Morris. Where is our president? Lois, I was on the radio this morning, and I had two different radio hosts ask me this question. It was like, where is President Biden on this? Because it is this is something that you would expect a president to come out and make a statement on. It can be 5 to 7 minutes. It doesn't have to be long, but make a statement about that, takes command and shows he's in charge and all that kind of stuff. He doesn't take any questions. He just goes up. He's in the White House. He makes a statement. He turns around. He walks off. And then they have some military guy behind who can answer questions afterwards. But it's kind of the president's job to use the bully pulpit to calm the nation in this kind of situation. And it's disturbing that they don't appear to want the nation to be calm at this particular moment. In fact, they're exacerbating the problem as they go around and apparently are completely out of their depth. Yeah, Brian. Well, I think we're going to have a real examination. I'm going to talk about this American parts in these Chinese spy balloons, but they import our parts for doing stuff just like we import their parts for building most of the munitions in our military, for instance. I think one of the interesting things that's going to come out of this is these balloons were supposedly, what we think has happened is that consumer manufacturers who are not viewed as defense manufacturers in China were the primary manufacturers of a lot of the parts of these balloons. And it comes down to a very simple lack of understanding about the way China runs. Every single business in China is, at its core, run by the Chinese government. They have the facade of being independent, but if they are a big company, they have the Communist Chinese Party members are on their board of directors. And the Constitution of China makes it clear that corporations serve our national defense tools first. So every time somebody tells you, oh, you need to be diversified into international stocks, and you buy a Vanguard fund, say, and you need to ask a question. You need to do the research. Is that money that you're investing being invested in China? If it's being invested in China, you're investing in the Chinese military industrial complex. You're investing in making parts that are in building munitions and building planes and trains and ships designed to kill Americans. That is what they do. You're building hardware if you're investing in Huawei, you're building hardware designed to spy on Americans and give the Chinese a competitive advantage in a war. Because every single company based in China is part of the Chinese war machine. From a diaper manufacturer to a chip manufacturer, they are all part of that machine. So when we import stuff from China, no matter how benign, if it's got Chinese components, it's not, we're effectively buying and giving money to and transferring money over to the Chinese government to use to attack the United States of America. We've been saying this for a long time about how stupid it is for us to continue on this pathway as a nation. It is. It's time when our government needs to understand this and cut the U.S. Dependence in terms of our military dependence upon Chinese goods, Chinese manufacturers. That should have been done a long time ago. Donald Trump was part of doing that. Did turn out that, some people said, Donald Trump, you don't know what you're talking about. This is all safe. Well, Trump changed the thinking on this, changed the dynamic. But the fact is, the business community said, we're going to wait Trump out because, if he doesn't win another term, we want to continue making money in China. And so consequently, we're just going to whistle by this graveyard. Well, can't whistle by the graveyard anymore. And that's I think there's going to be a lot of conversation about this, and things like, one of the things that bothers me, and I was told this by a competitor of this company, so take it with a grain of salt. But I was told that when GM, General Motors, got bailed out by the U.S. taxpayers, ended up with a zero balance sheet, so they didn't have any debt on their balance sheet, that what they did was they didn't go to Flint, Michigan. We know they didn't go to Flint, Michigan and refurbish the factory in Flint. We know they didn't go and do anything they didn't build more factories in America. Now, what they did is they created more debt, but they did create more debt. And they created that debt by building factories, car manufacturing plants in China in partnership with Chinese companies. And now China has surpassed the United States in terms of and is second to Japan, I believe, in terms of worldwide sales of automobiles. We bailed out GM 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and GM helped the Chinese build their automobile industry. It's the fact of the matter is, and they can do what they want to do. They're a company, but it just galls me. It galls me that we sit there and we continue doing this, and we continue basically funding those who would have us all strung up. So that's just unacceptable. We have to start demanding that these companies fight back. And by the way, GM should never be able to run the commercial that says the Chevys are like apple pie with hot dogs, apple pie, and Chevrolet. They should never be able to run that commercial again. But just irritates the hell out of me. Take your mind off a laptop and document dump. Yeah, Eddie, I think you may be onto something there. We've got Chinese balloons as and so we don't get the classified documents that Joe Biden has and off the news. And so yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe the trade-off is that they're trying to distract, and I would be not surprised if that were the case. Certainly would be their MO. Yeah, I think that if I were president, and obviously I'm not, but if I were president of the United States, what I would do is I would basically get the Joint Chiefs of Staff together, and I would say, how did we not know this? And did we know this? Force them to tell the truth. And if they did not know it, if it was a total blind spot and they didn't know it, well, the person in charge of the NORAD command would be fired. And I'd fire the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff that apparently is too incompetent to be able to recognize that somebody might use 18th century technology or 19th century technology to be able to slow walk spy machines across our borders, and that they were doing it all over the world. And for some reason, we didn't know that they were doing this all over the world. I mean, you have to guess that we didn't know that, even though the Chinese were. I don't know how we possibly could not have known that, but ultimately heads should roll. And, every president says the buck stops here, but truthfully, every president is very good at saying that and then firing subordinates because the buck really stops with subordinates. And at the very least, General Milley should lose his job and get an opportunity to leave public service and join a defense contractor in the place he's been looking for. So that's because this is putting our nation in danger, and these incompetent foofs are they're killing me. Let's see what we have. All lies. Could be, Charles. I mean, the fact is we haven't got a very straight story out of this, and it's disconcerting to say the least. Wow. Well, it's the best disguise that a clown can have is to not wear the nose. So I'll just leave it at that. And La La Langland. Yeah. It's one of the things that I think we've come across with this is that we have even the White House press corps is quietly saying that they get nothing out of the White House briefings, that the new White House press secretary is completely overmatched in her job, and and so the briefings are essentially useless from getting any information standpoint, and you have to assume that's the way the Biden administration wants them. Yeah, I love how they're calling them unidentified flying objects or unidentified objects, and making it and trying to get us to all start talking about UFOs and stuff. It is a giant distraction, Ronald. You are 100% correct. And the bottom line on this is a distraction away from a president who is, I don't know how benefits him, but it's a distraction away from the corruption in the military intelligence agencies, who have spent their time being weaponized. And apparently, this is the part that it just drives me nuts. The intelligence agencies seem to be so focused on trying to take down anybody who supports Donald Trump or Donald Trump himself that they basically decided they're not going to do their job. What makes this really suspicious to me, though, is we all remember that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Milley, in the last days of the Trump administration, bragged in a book that in the last days of the Trump administration, that he had contacted his Chinese counterpart to assure him that he would stop any aggressive actions that might be contemplated, which is admitted treason. Okay, that's admitted treason. There's no way that in any other universe that would be allowed. But he felt emboldened in a book to say that, and and so when you know that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff values his friendship with the his counterpart in China more than he values the defense of his own country, apparently, it makes it really, really difficult to take anything that they say as being true. And it is this is dramatically weakens the United States standing in the world. And a weak United States makes the world a much more dangerous place, as all sorts of bad actors will feel empowered and emboldened to take actions in the next 2 years. And there's going to be a lot of people who are going to die around the world because bad actors who would not do these things, if they saw a strong America, will feel free to move forward and try to take territory, kill their enemies, because they'll know they have nothing to fear from the only country that stands up and says, no, we're not going to allow you to engage in mass murder on a military field. So the world's a more dangerous place because Joe Biden is incompetent. There's just no other way to do it. Let's go to the second story. It's another weird story. You guys have probably seen this, but what we're looking at is in East Palestine, Ohio, about 10 days ago, there was a train wreck, and we heard very little about it, but 50-car train wreck, which and you can see the night sky being lit up with it right there. The train wreck had a bunch of the chemical that makes PVC pipes and things like that in the cars. And this is a pretty volatile chemical and pretty bad for you. A number of the train cars, the cars were breached and exploded. The railroad drained a lot of the nastier chemicals out of some of the cars, and then lit them on fire so they wouldn't explode. And they had a wholesale evacuation of the town of East Palestine. And now there are reports that the chemicals are maybe in the Ohio River system to some extent. And I believe there's now a lot of reporting that's beginning to come out on this. I was told today that Tucker Carlson is likely to have a story on it tonight. So that'll be interesting to see what he has to say. But the fact of the matter is, I'm old enough to remember all the way back to 2015 when the EPA went off and did something, and they had contractors working on a mine out in Colorado, and the contractors breached the dam in this mine, and the EPA caused the various. I'll just click on one. Caused the river to turn gold because of all the debris, all the stuff that was in the that was kind of, it was a waste berm, and and the water was blocked from escaping, and EPA contractors went and broke down the wall because they did it wrong, and they caused the threats to the Colorado River system and the like. Now the Colorado River never was polluted from this stuff, but we ended up with a pretty big disaster, and it was big news for about 3 days until the media discovered that the EPA was at fault. And the EPA, as strange as it may seem, took a full day to report what had happened in this Gold King mine spill. Took a full day to admit what happened and report what happened. I imagine if an actual private sector gold mine company took a full day to report a mistake of this magnitude, that there would be, the EPA would be, up in arms, but that's what they did. So it always intrigues me when you see stuff happening that, and then you don't hear anything about it, because the Gold King mine, we stopped hearing anything about it after it was discovered that we were tracking the river flows as they were becoming polluted, until we discovered the EPA was at fault. Suddenly, the media lost interest. I'm just kind of confused that we have 9 days after this disaster, the media is finally catching up that this is a problem. And they're saying that I brought this map up so you can see something on it. Let's see if I can do this. Okay, oops, let me go the other way. Okay, you can see where it actually, the problem was. This is Columbus, Cincinnati's down here. The Ohio River runs like this. It runs up, and it basically runs like, so it outlines the outside of Ohio. So and it heads up into this direction. So it's right around, its head is right about there. So, and it ends up down here into Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh right there, because as you know, Pittsburgh is the Three Rivers Stadium there, famously. Ohio River is one of the three rivers. So this is a flow into this river effectively impacts the waterway all the way down to Cincinnati and further, because it then goes on to the Mississippi River. It's one of the great waterways in the United States. And the Cincinnati is testing the water to make certain that they don't detect any chemicals in it, because it would be downstream. It's 11 days later, 9 days later by now. So there's a lot of testing going on. But the fact of the matter is, I'm just astonished that what was a pretty big deal, the potential pollution of one of the major river systems in the United States, was completely and totally ignored. And it's and I'm not saying that the railroad, I think it's Norfolk Southern, didn't do yeoman's job to try to minimize the damage that the leaking cars were creating. But gosh, this would be, I'm just, once again, I think you're going to hear some about this tonight, so I wanted to bring it up because it's now beginning to get a lot of attention. What do when you think about this stuff, what do you guys think? And I'm reading through the comments, and we really are sitting here with and I get the dominant comment is that we have a president who's completely and totally incompetent. I think that, and if he's not incompetent, he is subversive. I'll say that. But it's, when I think about the Chinese balloons, I'll go back to that. When I think about the Chinese balloons, how much of it is? How much did they discover it and say, oh, here's a great distraction? Or, I mean, is it possible? Is it possible? Like I said at the very beginning, is it possible that we've had Chinese balloons flying above us for a whole long time? For a whole long time. And we didn't know it until a rancher in Montana looked up and saw the massive Chinese balloon flying overhead and said, wait a second, that's not supposed to be there. It took a picture and went on the internet, and suddenly the government had to do something about it. They had to talk about it. And then we let the thing, knowing full well that there was a surveillance balloon, we let it fly across our country, taking pictures the whole way. And then we shoot them, and we know pretty much chart. I saw the chart of where it was going to head out to sea. 3 days before it hit maybe 2 days before it hit. And yet we didn't have apparently salvage ships right off the coast of South Carolina. So we shoot the thing down off the coast of South Carolina, and we're still trying to salvage the balloon from the Atlantic. I mean, there was absolutely no preparation. It was like nobody in their right mind sits there and says, gee whiz, we've got to find out what's going on with this thing and then lets it go out to sea before you shoot it. They're still trying to find the balloon that was shot down in the Yukon because Canada's trying to find it. But the fact is the Yukon's wild, and shoot something down, it's like looking for D.B. Cooper. So that one's may never be found. We have balloons shot down in Lake Huron, which they've got a pretty good idea where it hit, but they haven't found it yet. And, you just sit there and you look at this and you say, there was no way to actually be able to have eyes on it so you could pinpoint exactly where it was hitting as it was going down. I mean, it would seem logical that you would do that you would actually have eyes on target and know exactly where it hit, so you would be able to then go to that exact location and find it. But recognize the currents are different and all that, but gosh, this is, maybe my expectations are too high. Maybe I watch too many read too many Tom Clancy novels where people actually think through more than one step at a time. But I've never felt less confident that our military was competent. And because the one thing I've always known is these guys know they're really good at their jobs. And what we're seeing is apparently the infestation of the Department of Justice at headquarters seems to be similarly at the Pentagon, and it's not good for the world or America. Yeah. Washington thinks we've all been dumbed down at school, but not a lot of us. We know what the communism. Yeah, it's sadly, a lot of us have had to take off our trust glasses and now look everything with skepticism. It's all distraction. They show you the left hand and punch you with the right. I think there's something to be said for that, Frederick. When they first were talking about this, I said that a video that I always kind of paid attention to and thought was interesting was because it was deception. And a guy would sit there and say, okay, I'm going to hit you in the face or slap you in the face. And the other guy would try to stop me. And he'd go a couple of times pretty fast, and the other guy would stop him. And then he just kind of lazy his hand up, and then just go boom, hit the guy in the face just like that. And the lesson was that sometimes when you move slowly, you're able to do, accomplish something that you can't accomplish moving fast, because it puts our guard down. And maybe that's the lesson that our military didn't learn. But anytime stuff like this goes on, I wonder what the next shoe is that's going to drop. This is at a time when, I think we all know that our intelligence agencies are under incredible scrutiny because of their decision to target us politically, and they've been focused on if you fly a flag in your front yard, you go to a school board meeting, and you're not happy with what they're doing to your kids. You're enemy number one, and apparently hasn't been a lot of forethought put into this idea that maybe we need to pay attention to the people who are the real problem. And our challenge, and I'm going to just end with this because I've said it so many times, I'm blue in the face with it. Ukraine is a real problem, okay? So it may seem like switching gears, but it isn't. Ukraine is a real problem. I will give you that. Ukraine is not our problem. Ukraine is Europe's problem. The Chinese are our problem. Nobody in Europe's going to help us if we have to fight the Chinese, okay? We're going to have to help ourselves. If we can't stop Chinese balloons, what are we going to do with hypersonic missiles? What message does it send to the people of Taiwan when we're scrambling around trying to shoot down balloons about our competence and be able to fight the Chinese army and Chinese technology and Chinese military? Donald Trump was pretty straightforward in saying we've got to get ourselves out of having our parts being manufactured in China for our military equipment. And yet there's been virtually no pressure to do that. Donald Trump was very straightforward in saying we can't have our pharmaceuticals manufactured in China, yet they still are. It's time for America to wake up and stop giving money to the Chinese, but also having things we're dependent upon made by the Chinese. It's time for us to start developing our own rare earth metals. There's this in Las Vegas, Nevada, in the area around Las Vegas. There's a rare earth metal mine that was developed. It's developed a little bit before the Trump administration was kind of shut down. The Chinese were nosing around trying to buy it, as well as, and there was supposed to be a smelting facility right next to it as well. And this was, going to dig up rare earth metals. We have actually a lot of them in the United States. We're just not allowed to mine them. And but no, the Trump administration said, no, the Chinese can't have any part of this operation. And we're gonna have the mine, and we're going to be smelting those rare earth metals ourselves. That's the model that we need to be doing all over this country. Is we need to be having our own rare earth metal development. The Trump administration made a huge mistake in I think it's 2019, 2020, when they said, no, we're not going to allow the development of the Pebble mine up in Alaska. Why? Well, the Pebble mine has not, first of all, it's $1 trillion worth of metal there, but it's mostly copper, silver, gold, but it also has rhodium. Rhodium's necessary for aircraft engines, and it's an independent source of rhodium for the United States on U.S. territory. It didn't have a smelting capacity built in, but you certainly could create a smelting capacity. And so as opposed to shipping raw ore across to be put on ships and shipped to South Korea to be smelted and then sold back, the raw materials sold back to us, we would be, actually smelting it ourselves. There's an environmental cost to that. There's an environmental cost to smelting it ourselves. But guess what? Having a self-contained capacity to gather rare earth metals that are necessary for making modern war machines, seems like a pretty darn good idea. And we darn well better stop thinking about things from a narrow perspective of transferring the environmental risk to South Korea or elsewhere for smelting. We darn well better start smelting our lead, smelting and opening a lot of smelting facilities, because we have the rocks, we have the material, the minerals, most of the minerals here in abundance. We just aren't willing to accept the environmental risk of mining them. It's time we say to the environmentalists, our national security trumps whatever you want, whatever you're doing. We're going to mine the minerals that are here, and you're going to shut up and get out of the way, because we're being politically corrected to death. And the only thing that's saving, I think the only thing that's saving us from China attacking us now is they project that we will get weaker and weaker over time, because it's a battle just to get anything made in the United States. And they know that if a president gets elected who they don't like, they can wait the person out for 4 years, because the bureaucrats will just sit on their thumbs and not allow anything to occur. That's what happens, and we have to fix it. And that's what we do at Americans for Limited Government. We're in the fight to fix this. It's we've been in this fight for a long time to fix it. And but there's some things that need to be done right now. We know how to get them done. We know what needs to be done. And darn it, we're going to do what we can to try to get our politicians to understand that when they put their hand up and they say, I will duly swear that I will defend this Constitution, then they darn well better start doing it and stop bending their knee to Al Gore's false god of global warming. And if they're not willing to, America won't survive. And that's just true. So with that happy note, we'll talk to you again tomorrow. Appreciate your tuning in. And this is Rick Manning, Americans for Limited Government.